Hi, everybody. I'm so excited to be here and I see so many familiar names in the participant list, so it's good to connect with you all again. My name is Jill Gambill. I'm the executive director and senior research associate at Georgia Tech. I lead the Coastal Equity and Resilience Hub, or the CEAR Hub. Before this, I was at UGA for 13 years with UGA Marine Extension and Georgia Sea Grant. And so hopefully we had a chance to collaborate there. And if not, look forward to connecting with you if you're interested in anything I'm going to be talking about. You can go on to the next slide. So the Coastal Equity and Resilience Hub is a network or initiative where we're bringing together nonprofit organizations, environmental justice organizations, local governments, and academic institutions. And we're working to co-develop knowledge, tools, approaches to building community resilience. This includes Jazz as part of the coalition. Dawood is also who will be speaking next, part of the team. And we try to work hand in hand with communities to create fair and just solutions. So really thinking through some of the things that Jazz was talking about before, as far as, disproportionate impacts, and following communities in where they're leading, where we're kind of providing support to the communities, helping them access data, helping them research different issues, but they are really leading the projects. You can see these are some of the founding partners of the CEAR Hub. You can go on to the next one. And so Megan and Jazz asked for a definition of resilience. This is the definition that I personally use. It's the ability of a community to equitably prevent, withstand, respond to, and recover from a shock or stressor. Equitably is a really important aspect of that often gets overlooked in resilience work. Shock and stressor. So shock, I think of that as, these one-time kind of big events like a hurricane. Stressors are the longer term underlying pressures on a community, like climate change, or systemic inequity or racism, having equitable access to resources, population growth, like Megan said, coastal development. And so there's interaction between those two. And if we're just thinking about the big events and we're ignoring some of those, longer term, like simmering pressures, we're actually, this stands that we may not actually be building the resilience of the community. And then we focus on both reducing a community's risk through trying to be as holistic as possible in our approaches and finding co-benefits, while also increasing adaptive capacity. And so that's required us to have a really hard look in thinking about building capacity at some of the extractive processes and practices that exist that have led to existing conditions. Including, within our own institutions, and trying to kind of rethink the partnerships that we're forming. You can go ahead to the next one. So these are some of the core values that underline our work. We're focusing mostly on disadvantaged communities that are experiencing the disproportionate impacts of climate change and environmental injustices. We also believe that the people who are closest to the problem are closest to the solution. That a researcher that is not from that community, while we have very valuable information and knowledge to share, it really is that local knowledge and in some cases the traditional knowledge that are the most critical in helping to come up with solutions. We also partner with communities really focused on strengths rather than starting from kind of a needs-based approach. This has been developed by Jenny Hirsch at Georgia Tech, an asset-based approach where we look at all the assets and the strengths within the communities, the relationships, and try to build upon that rather than seeing it as a deficit. We also strive to build trust and be accountable and transparent with the communities. And then the next piece is really critical. We try to equitably share power and distribute resources. This means that sometimes the funding is, we're just passing it along as much as we can to our partners. We negotiate lower indirect rates. For those of you that are within universities, you'll know what I mean by that. And we try to share power so that it doesn't have to be, myself leading a project. We actually would prefer that it's the local community that's leading, and we can provide support in the background. And then we believe that, collaborating is better than if we're working in our own silos. Go to the next one. So this work began about 6 years ago through Georgia Tech's Smart Sea Level Sensor project. You guys may remember back in 2016, 2017, Georgia coast experienced a Hurricane Matthew and Hurricane Irma. We had a lot of flooding issues. We have one long-term tide gauge along the Georgia coast, and we were seeing really different impacts in communities, but we didn't have a great way of capturing that. And so Georgia Tech developed these low-cost, inexpensive sensors that could monitor water levels in real time. And they've been deploying them throughout Chatham County. There's 64 installed right now. And they're being used for emergency management purposes. They've also developed a dashboard for viewing knowing, which neighborhoods need to be responded to first, and which bridges and roads are being impacted. And then there's a lot of modeling that's going into that as well. You can go on to the next one. And so we initially began with this framework really focused on flooding. And we had, our modeling, our sensors planning, education, workforce development. If you go on to the next one. But as we began to work with communities, we heard a lot of other concerns. In Brunswick, they're very concerned about contamination from the 4 Superfund sites that they have. We're hearing about food security issues and, concerns with the air's property and land retention, air quality issues from the ports. And so we've really expanded our approach and tried to bring on additional partners, additional expertise in order to have that more holistic approach as we're working with communities, and be flexible that to respond to what is a priority for them. Next one. So I just wanted to give an example of this work. One of the first communities we began to partner with is Pinpoint. It's a Gullah Geechee community in Chatham County, in the northern part of the Georgia coast. Gullah Geechee people, if you're not familiar with that term, they are descendants of enslaved Africans who were forced to work on rice, indigo, and cotton plantations. And they were often located on isolated barrier islands along the southeast. And so there is the Gullah Geechee Cultural Heritage Corridor that runs from North Carolina down to the northern part of Florida. That is a national heritage area and recognized by the U.S. government. So Pinpoint is one of those communities, and because many Gullah Geechee communities were isolated, they've retained a lot of their language and food and music and culture over the years. You can go on to the next one. So we've been meeting with Pinpoint. We have monthly community-wide meetings that are really well attended, and we also have a committee with the leadership of the community that we meet with weekly, and began to talk with them about different priorities that they had in building their resilience. Some of these relate to climate change, and then some of them are, sort of outside the scope of climate change, but I wanted to just provide you some of the issues that they're thinking about. Traffic control, a lot of traffic going through there, high speed, and they've already made progress on that, where they're getting speed bumps installed, paid for by the county. They have a lot of power outages that relate to hurricanes, and they are also making progress on that, where they're getting trees trimmed and dead trees removed. They are working on establishing resilience hubs throughout the community where they can share emergency equipment and resources. They're also really concerned about flooding, and so we've been helping them partner with the Army Corps of Engineers and get information about their flood risk and potential actions to take. Failing septic systems, also related to flooding, and then also just the age of the systems, heirs properties, healthcare, healthy food, and then a lot of youth engagement and enrichment. So we're going to be investing as part of those resilience hubs, having spaces for workforce development, having K through 12 education opportunities. Next one. And so I just wanted to highlight real quick, as part of our partnership with Pinpoint, we realized that, yeah, let me back up. Hopefully you've heard of the Justice 40 initiative. It was established by the White House several years ago, where 40% of overall benefits from federal climate, clean energy investments have to go to disadvantaged communities. And so the federal government developed a tool called the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool to identify where these disadvantaged communities are located. As we were working with Pinpoint, we realized they are in a census tract that is not being categorized as disadvantaged. And so they will not qualify for Justice 40 funding. This is because they've been in their location a very long time. They're right on the water, a lot of coastal development around them, wealthier neighborhoods that are bringing their census data up for that census tract. And so they're not qualifying. And we wondered, are they the only communities that are experiencing this? We suspected no, but we didn't really know how to go about it. And so we partnered with the Pinpoint Betterment Association and the Gullah Geechee Cultural Heritage Corridor Commission. We studied 145 Gullah Geechee communities and found that about half are impacted by this same problem. And so we just released a report. I'd be happy to share it with y'all. But this isn't just a problem for Gullah Geechee communities. It really is any community that's where it's a small segment of a census tract that's surrounded by wealthier neighborhoods could be impacted and have trouble accessing Justice 40 funding. So just a heads up about that. And then finally, I wanted to share a resource, and I'll put this in the chat, the link to it. This has really been a guiding factor for me in my work in thinking about how I'm partnering with communities and checking myself. It kind of gives guidance on how much funding you're allocating in your projects to communities versus keeping internally, how much role and ownership and power you're allocating to communities. And so I just find it really helpful as I'm thinking about who's setting the agenda, who's establishing who's going to be invited to meetings, those kind of questions about process. This can be really helpful. And I believe that's it. Thank you all so much.